So today I'm joined by Karim Asperula from Dark Source. Karim's an award-winning lighting designer. You were based in London, but now you're based in Gorey. So
Yeah,
it's fantastic to
excellent.
have to have you over. But it's just interesting. I think there's an awful lot to talk about. I think in light and lighting, I think the approach that you're having in terms of with Dark Source, I think it would be good. Well, firstly, Dark Source with Dark Source, I think you guys are from a lighting design perspective very much focused on the environment, very much focused on dark skies. So it'd
Yeah,
be really interesting to hear, and I suppose over the next 30 minutes, just your approach and how you got into lighting originally.
yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me, Willie. And it was I think the first time we met was in Dark Horse in London, and it was just
Yeah.
about when we were about to move over to Ireland. And I like what you guys do, and I've been to your showroom as well, so I'm really well impressed with how you guys deal with light and how you design it and deliver it. And I think that's one of the interesting things that we were just talking about, the level of richness and substance there is in lighting design. And it's actually, when we talk about it, light comes across as just one dimensional, but actually it has so much more qualities that it can deliver on. And I think that's how I got interested in the dark skies aspect of lighting design. So I actually worked at a commercial lighting design practice in London for about nearly 8 years, and I was growingly realizing that the impact not only that light has, but generally speaking, us as light merchants, let's say, lighting designers, engineers, we had a lot to also contribute to that as well. And I realized our level of responsibility and my desire to, feel a bit more purposeful in terms of like dealing with the negative impacts of light pollution or mitigating light pollution. So I wanted to be at the forefront of my company. So in 2019, I set up Dark Source. It's a lighting design practice driven by social and environmental values. And as you said, like visual is an important part, but it's not the driving element of Dark Source. We're very much driven by, protecting environment and also meeting social needs. Visual is important, but it's not the main driver here.
Yeah, yeah. And it's sort of like I know from my perspective, I've always been aware of the dark skies, that sort of light pollution sort of need to be very mindful in our approach to it, but probably underestimated a little bit. And it's only the last number of years I've really dug into it, and it just seems to be, well, I've started to dig a lot into circadian lighting as well and how it's affecting ourselves. But I think the way it affects ourselves, it's affecting, we've all developed, but we are nature as such, and we've all developed in this sort of day-night cycle. And as I sort of looked into that, sort of realized, my God, yeah, we really haven't. Like the effect of light pollution, I think is probably massively underestimated. Do you think? Like I think certainly awareness in general public is probably really poor.
Yeah, absolutely. And the crossover between light and health is so huge. And I have to say that we're just scratching the surface in terms of circadian lighting, or like, the impact of even flicker that might have on, a certain demographic across the population as well. And as you said, life on Earth evolved, around the concept of day and night cycle. And light really helped us, conquer and tame the night. That kind of, we were able to colonize the night, because nightscape was a different realm and planet that wasn't really friendly or habitable. It was very hostile. So the advent of lighting changed that. But it's fair to say now we've gone above and beyond, and we've been so excessive. We're actually now seeing the negative impacts of the abundance of light consumption culture. And I think we're now understanding the importance of regulating this. And I have to say, as lighting designers, people who deal with light on a daily basis, it brings an important responsibility to us. Artificial light at night, regardless of its color, temperature, etc., it still impacts on, blocks your impacts on your melatonin production, which is sleep hormone, and we know blue in particular is hazardous in terms of it stimulates the brain to think that it's the morning time, but come to think of it, in the 21st century, every surface we're looking at is emitting light. So light is a very popular medium. Therefore, it brings the important responsibility for us to handle it carefully.
Yeah, like it's something that struck me, and maybe it's what drove you to get into lighting originally. Like it's sort of, we are at a really exciting time with lighting and light. Like, I mean, we've been creative for thousands of years with sound, and now we can do that with light. And what a like interesting time to be, in the industry we're in. But it does, as you're saying, it does have, there are sort of consequences for us not being conscious of the bigger picture when we're designing with it, and maybe the impact it's having on us, that blue sort of wavelength of light at the wrong time, or just the wrong sort of hyper light at the wrong time of the day. But in terms of, let's say, because I know with the environments, there's so many, it's such a big ecosystem, like nature is an ecosystem, we're part of that, I suppose, but and you've got nocturnal animals, and then you've got like breeding patterns, like where is it affecting, I suppose depending on the part of the world you're in, it's going to affect different animals and but where is it primarily affecting, or what examples would you have of where it's affecting nature, the sort of extent of which light pollution we're having?
The biggest impact I can say by far is its impact on insect and pollinator population, which threatens us directly. That's also highly related to the fact that we didn't really appreciate pollinators as much as we should, over the time of our existence. And now we're coming to understand what an important role they've been actually, having for us and for the well-being of the planet. So insects are, they're not, as resilient to, or they are not immune to the effects of lighting as much as we can, because we can walk away from light, we can close our eyes, or we can change direction, we can use blinds, curtains and stuff. I find it very fascinating that people have developed the extremes of tolerating light. For example, you were saying that with sound, you will never tolerate your neighbor, throwing a very loud party at like 3 a.m. You'll go knock on their door and say, "Can you keep it down, please?" But with light, we've developed every single type of measure, not just mechanically, but culturally as well. We tolerate it, and which we shouldn't have, because all these layers of light added up, and sky is literally the limit. The biggest disparity the light pollution causes for the insect population or pollinators, I would also include bats in it. Interesting enough, still bats are not classified as pollinators in many countries, although they are very important, significant pollinators.
When you're talking about pollinators, like bats, insects, you're talking about bees, are you talking about birds and all
that? Butterflies, and the insect level of the ecosystem is so interconnected and so fragile. I don't want to just single out pollinators. Generally speaking, insects, our understanding of them are very limited, and they are very essential to the ecosystem. So it's very important that we implement, whatever measures we have to mitigate the adverse effects of lighting. There's some simple things that we know what eliminates light pollution is use warm color temperatures, as warm as you can go. We're very lucky that there's a very, not a silver bullet, but as close as it gets, that like, whatever's astronomer friendly is also happens to be biodiversity friendly. That could not easily be the case. We're very lucky that, these both things are aligned, that, the warmer you go is better for the environment. That's because of something that we call Rayleigh scattering effect. So blue or cooler color temperatures tend to travel further in the atmosphere. They get scattered in the atmosphere further. But warmer the color, it's keeps the light more localized. It doesn't get as scattered as much. Plus, from the insect, majority of the insect population, not every single one of them, but majority across the board, are more what would you call it, sensitive to the UV light and UV end of the spectrum, which means the bluer the light is more interfering with their system, which means it becomes more visible for them. And literally, it can be the most glaring source that messes with their evolution, such as orientation based on stars, moon, etc. Or it becomes so dazzlingly bright that they can't see anything. They start circling around the lights until dying of exhaustion. And one other aspect of it is, like, let's say bats that feed on, or many other mammals or amphibians, that or reptiles that feed on the insects. Some of them are light averse, some of them are not. So this means this creates this duality and disparity between the species that can come near light and they can have an open buffet of all the moths and flies trapped in the light. Or if you're unlucky enough to be a bat species, for millions and millions of years, you evolved to, avoid light but stay in darkness. You're much more likely to die because you won't be able to feed yourself. Therefore, you won't be able to propagate. And that is one of the biggest problems that we see with light. And because we have a very versatile visual system, yet we cannot see UV and IR, so we cannot really understand how they experience the world. But we heavily misjudge the world in terms of what we can see with the bandwidth of visual spectrum that we can experience the world. But all the species actually experience the world in way different shape or form.
It's something that we sort of I suppose again forget, and that, like, and again it's like with all of these different bats and insects and birds and all these different creatures in the environment, they all have a different sort of they're more sensitive to different parts of the spectrum, really, aren't they? And they all experience the world completely, in a different way, which is sort of really interesting in itself. But let's say, like, the issue with the insects, and like it's quite it's quite large in terms of it's not a small thing. There's big drops in a lot of numbers and that type of thing. Is there like substantial sort of drops? Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I right with that? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think we didn't connect the rise of light population with the insect decline directly up until very recently. Yet it's still hard to just say it's only caused by light pollution, because there's the chemicals. Pesticides and other elements are also on the rise, attributing to this. But I think it's fair to say that light pollution is also creating something what we call fragmentation. So, if you're an insect, or let's say, you're a nocturnal animal, you're relying on having open channels and portals of, access, uninterrupted access. So light pollution is also creating these visual barriers, whatever it might be, a very lit highway that is separating, very dark zones or regions. That is still becoming a massive issue, even if it's just one single road. And in some parts of the world, light pollution has increased about like 400%. We know in Ireland it increases average median of 2% per year. And it's a significant amount. And if you total out the cost of it, from memory, I think it was amounting to something like 30,000 tons of CO2, which would be in Ireland an equivalent of 30 million euros just wasted energy. So this is, biodiversity and impact on environment is one part of that topic. The other important part is we can do much better without wasting all this energy. This is about also just protecting reducing energy consumption and reducing carbon emissions, which is an important part of this topic as well.
It's sort of funny, isn't it? Because like it seems to me that like the light, a lot of the LED now is a lot bluer. So it's a lot bluer wavelengths sort of out there than what we had with the old sort of street lights, which are much more orange and that. And then a big drive, I think, for that is because it's LED is much more efficient, with using the blue wavelengths of light and that. So we get this much more efficient. There's this big push for carbon, reducing carbon sort of emissions, getting more and more efficient, and then we're just using more and more of it. So it's sort of, we're just overlighting everything, and there's no real awareness that, look, you can't just light everything, and are we really dropping, energy consumption as much as, I'm sure we are, but like, not as much as we could,
I think you're spot on. I think it's a very good observation. We had these, high pressure, low pressure sodium lights, and that's the lit street of our childhood memories, that this orange glow, that everything looks dead brown underneath because they had a terrible color rendering. But it was a very good source, and I still love sodium. It's very unfortunate it's outphased. But in the age of LEDs, as you said, there's we can really talk negatively about LEDs, but also we have to appreciate the qualities that LEDs brought for us as well. At no point we had such a versatile and an amazing lighting tool that, from color consistency to dimmability, we couldn't dim any of the discharge lamps apart from fluorescents, but you couldn't really dim sodium or metal halide. So that alone is giving you the potential to save so much. But as you said, having that ability does not always translate to that being, utilized properly. There's this paradox called Jevons paradox. As a commodity gets cheaper, then actually the consumption of it goes higher, because it's easier to buy, and LEDs became much more cost efficient, which meant which should have meant maybe the level of light should have stayed stagnant or went low, but it's not the case. We're actually, at no point in our history had we consumed this level of light. The other thing is, I find very fascinating, is that because I often get this question about comparing the energy savings between the sodium and LED. Sodium is actually a really impressive source, but in terms of lamp life, it's 24,000 hours, where average the lowest of the low LED can provide 50,000 hours effortlessly. Better qualities can go up to 100,000 hours. So it's no brainer, definitely a much more capable source. But LEDs, most of the LEDs, up until really recently, were derived from blue LEDs. We only, modified the color through the phosphor coating, then actually additively changed the color. So you get the blue light because that's the original LED that was first found. And all the variations came from blue, which meant, yes, there's a tiny bit of inefficiency. That's the Achilles heel of warm lighting. It used to be as bad as maybe like 20% inefficient. Nowadays, it's catching up. It's maybe like 5% inefficient in comparison to cool or neutral white. But the problem is, as you said, many of the local authorities just purely focused on the lumens per watt package.
Yeah.
How many lumens can I get for every watt? And my argument is the LEDs are so, so energy efficient, and it's no brainer. You'll get any LEDs you get will be in and around, ranging from 60 lumens per watt to going up to 120 lumens per watt. So much more efficient source, and it localizes the beam distribution so well that you can channel the light where you need it, where it wasn't the case with the discharge lamps. The light went in every direction.
Yeah.
So it's not a one-to-one scale comparison. So you definitely have a much more like precision-oriented, focused source where you're trying to compare it with a bulb, essentially. And that only concern about the energy efficiency made us blind to the impacts of the light pollution, because we never ever quantified what we lose with that 5% of efficiency. Yeah. But now we're understanding what it meant.
But it's still happening that way, though, isn't it? A little bit. I'd seen some new sort of they're increasing the sort of lumens per watt minimum lumen. I think it might be a new EU directive or something that I've seen recently. I'd have to check it, but it seems like they keep pushing that lumens per watt all the time. And then it's this holistic side. It's just been forgotten a little bit. Like, okay, are we getting the quality of light? Are we getting the right color temperature? Is it affecting our circadian rhythms, our health? There's that whole human-centric thing, and the environmental thing is much more than just efficiency. And I think I've seen it. There's a friend of mine as living in an estate not far from here. He called me last night. He said they're after changing all my street lights here, and they had lovely old sawn street lights with the traditional lampposts, and they've put a commercial fitting on top of it. It looks horrible from a aesthetic perspective, firstly. Doesn't look like it fits, but it's also a very much bluer light, and it just seems like, look, you're pushing sort of the boundaries in terms of what I think environmentally conscious sort of design is, but how long does it take that to trickle down to the likes of local authorities, and how do we create? There's really there's a challenge in creating that awareness, and I think it needs to change a lot quicker, because you could imagine that they're just going to keep rolling out this particular approach for another at least 5 years or something before it starts to turn, before that awareness trickles. Yeah,
I think you're very right about the awareness. One thing I just also I think you said something very interesting there in terms of why are we pushing the boundaries like blindly in every direction, rather than actually, I suppose, manufacturers' job is to push the boundaries as much as possible and create something that is so flexible that it brings the responsibility to us, the specifiers, lighting designers, engineers, authorities. The consumer needs to be definitely informed about this. Like, for example, we were talking about sodium, and nowadays exterior lighting, sodium had terrible color rendering, in and around 50 CRI or something. And nowadays exterior lighting is pushing the boundaries of 95, 99, 100. Who needs that? And recent studies showed actually the high CRI is not great for particularly insects and for their navigation system. There's a great study by Travis Longcourt where actually high CRI is not fantastic, because we didn't really experience color up until recently. The advent of electric lighting allowed that, because our visual system, the night vision, scotopic vision, is that
we shouldn't be using our night vision at nighttime. If I'm reading that right, is that the sort of angle? There's the rods and the cones. Is that it, or something?
Yes,
you're
the rods
more
and cones, and at night actually your vision is much more about trying to detect movement, because that was what posed you the most threat. It's not about accuracy. Your brain is kind of knitting this image together, because your visual system is never just your eyes. Your brain is constantly working together to correct the image. Any color is definitely very valuable information at night, but do we need 99 CRI at night? I'm not really sure. You need as if everything's lit at the same color rendering as the sun. That's a question. But I think bringing back to your essential question is, how long does it take for people to implement these. Authorities definitely, they have a big say on this, and it's there's a big missed opportunity, particularly I see in Ireland. There are lots of big tenders that are being won across counties, like a new, let's say, lighting contract to replace 4 counties lighting columns. That adds up to tens and thousands of lighting columns, and their majority of them will go in as 4,000 Kelvin. And I see there's a big issue there, switching from the warm orange glow of sodium, all of a sudden going up to the high cool color temperature plus high CRI and potentially high focused intensity, not generally speaking higher lumen package, but more focused on the horizontal plane. How does it change? I think it's the biggest question. It's it's not just about our eyes adjusting to darkness. Our minds need to adjust to it as well. So it's culturally, we're still getting there, and we need more time. We need more precedents. We need more examples that show us that another way is possible.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's it's really like there's a responsibility with the likes of myself and yourself and people in the industry, really. Like our industry is probably causing lots of problems and much more than I probably would have appreciated a few years ago. And I think there's definitely a responsibility to get that message out there and sort of, and I think that's what you're doing with the likes of Dark Source.
Willa, do you think that because it's something that I often think about, and I try to also philosophically, I'm looking for the reasons of this answer as well. Do you think that lighting designers and engineers, we assumed that that light would never come to this level of popularity? So we assumed maybe the one-off project you're doing and here and there, they're just very unique, because we never assumed that light can come to a level of popularity that actually a whole street worth of houses next to each other might ask for lighting design. I sometimes wonder, maybe that's also popularity of light, meaning more lighting to be designed, and maybe this is our role in the equation, that we're maybe finding ourselves contributing to light pollution unwillingly. But I was curious what your thought on this,
in terms of, you're saying that we never sort of felt that we're sort of concentrating on just sort of
on a project one-off, not thinking about what's going to happen the next door.
Yeah, and I think so, and I think probably I don't know, without trying to make it too big, in life in general, maybe people think that I can't really have much of an impact in what I'm doing because what am I? I'm just one person. I definitely think for me in our business, and I came across the circadian lighting back in 2009 in London. I remember thinking, because we tried to design an office that with fluorescent tubes that changed color temperature, and it didn't really work fantastically well or anything like that. But it seemed to me like that, yeah, God, this is going to be huge. And I remember at the time somebody said, I just in the passing, because we're all so busy, I think that's probably part of the problem. Look, the science isn't there, but talking to Martin Moore-Reed a few weeks ago, the science was definitely there in 2009, and the WHO had sort of had said that that the wrong type of lighting at nighttime is carcinogenic. But I think we're just, for me personally anyway, we're just so busy, and you're trying to grow your business, and you're trying to initially with small business, you're trying to survive, and then you're trying to do as well as you can, and there's so much challenges these days, isn't it, to try and to try and see that bigger picture. Sometimes you need to pull yourself out of your day to day to get the clarity, because otherwise you're just looking at everything that's right in front of your face and not really sort of standing back. I think it's massively interesting that it has grown to the size it had, that we are at a really sort of crucial time. It is, I think light's going to become really, really sort of prominent in public consciousness over the next while, and it's sort of, it's great that what we do, it has an impact, like it's having a negative impact, but if we can change that, we can have a positive impact, if that makes sense,
Yeah. I think, as you said, the more we learn and kind of implement the knowledge, as you said, out there since 2009. But now,
Yeah.
luckily, we're seeing like, you know, lots of manufacturers actually going into the circadian light. I don't want to say human-centric. That sounds very tedious to me. It's a great.
But some of it is wrong as well, isn't it? Because it's sort of like some of it is like based on color temperature, but it's to do with wavelengths and everything as well. So it's a little bit more complex, isn't it?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, it's much more complex. I mean, I think the human-centric term is coined by a very clever marketing strategy,
Yeah.
but that's probably the problem. We just looked at everything like humans in the center of everything, like. And now we're looking back, okay, we got to remove ourselves from the literally limelight and try to see it across the board, and including all these stakeholders, because light, you know, predominantly impacts on the nighttime environment. It changes our perception, whether it's for the better or for the worse. It can ruin an ambiance, or it can create a very visual ambiance and a very nice place to be in, but at the cost of, if it's not done, you know, carefully, it can cost a big bill for the environment as well. So I suppose the important thing is trying to find a kind of balancing act across the board of all these issues as much as possible. And it's going to be never possible to fully perfectly satisfy everyone, but I think doing our best, pushing the envelope is the best we can do.
And we're just going to be consistently learning as well. You know, we don't have the answers. You know, it's sort of we're trying to, you know, evolve in our understanding of how
Einstein
to do
has
this.
a very good saying that as the diameter of your knowledge expands, so does the circumference of your ignorance. So the more you learn, you understand how little you learn.
Yeah, that's exactly it, and I think it's very true. That's very, very true. Yeah, I think at times, as human beings, there can be a little bit of arrogance, you know, in terms of our understanding of, you know, everything. In terms of your approach, because I struggle a little bit. You know, there's some you in terms of from a lighting design perspective, there's so much you can, you know, the likes of in-ground uplighters, uplighting a lovely textured wall surface, you know, that's a great opportunity for create a beautiful aesthetic. But from an environmental perspective and a dark skies perspective, it's probably as bad as you can get. How do you approach that challenge? Because you're sort of, and even with your clients, to try and justify, you have to, I suppose, take a different approach in terms of the aesthetic when you're looking at that, and I suppose you're trying to, I'd imagine you're trying to educate your client as much as everything to try and get them to take on that.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Obviously, because you're a lighting designer yourself, you know, you clearly understand that you know, if you're trying to communicate dark skies, this means you are, you know, compromising on the vocabulary that you can use as a lighting designer, in terms of you cannot provide everything that lighting design has to offer. But it's challenging. I find it challenging, but it's also liberating for me, because I come from the, you know, I studied in Germany. I come from Bauhaus education of less is more. The more constraints you put on me, I thrive more as a designer. So I like having limitations. It really, you know, laser focuses me to come up with something, and it's very tight. Rather than having, you know, maybe 10 permutations of what you can offer, you're looking for that one that your client might like and might commit to it. And of course, it's a big conversation with the client, is that, as you said, we're trying to get the client on board. Without this participation, without this collaboration, you can't achieve this. Dark skies heavily rely on collaboration. It's not just you know, defined by the ego of the designer. It's a collaboration between the client, the space, yourself, and the community, and what the project needs, just in the middle of all these, you know, crossroads. And you're trying to basically serve an average median of like what is socially required, what's visually required, and what's the best for the environment. And you're trying to find the ultimate, you know, the crossing between all these verticals. And it's challenging. And as you said, and there are not many things that you can do. I mean, we all know that the uplit trees look great, but I can't do that. Like, that's
Yeah,
that's
but I don't think any of us should be doing that. I think you're right, and I should try to yeah, but it's just sort of it's sort of nearly you know stepping back from that temptation and go, yeah, we could do that, but is that the right thing to do? Is there other and I won't hold you too long, but I could chat for ages to be honest, but
Likewise.
is there any, let's say, techniques, obviously color temperature, timing, like, because we're going, for the likes of sort of being environmentally conscious, we're going much, much lower. I was at Light 23 there before Christmas and just walking to see, just to see some of the manufacturers, and they're coming up with 2,200. And so,
Which is
very
fantastic.
much more towards the orange end of the spectrum. But you really need to be going down to the really low color temperatures. Like in the future, do you see, like in 10, 15 years time, if we get this right, that everything will be sort of 2,200 in the evening with it, like ideally lighting shutting off at or dimming at a certain
Yeah,
time?
yeah.
Or
As you said, like, the standards have shifted towards the warm end. The average job used to be 3,000, 4,000 Kelvin, but nowadays actually we have the standard options because of the demand. Now we have warmer color temperatures. I think we need to push the dial further. I have to say, as warm as candlelight if you can.
yeah,
There
that's
are
what I would
new
think. Yeah,
there are new LEDs that are actually purely amber, for example. They have no blue spike in the spectrum whatsoever. They don't
yeah,
emit blue, which is also fantastic. And so we will need more kind of technologies of that sort available for us. And yeah, harsh, no, like stronger dimming and curfew regimes, etc., will be very important. And look, I mean, we're going through some tough times as interconnected, planet as well, in the sense of, for example, the energy bills almost doubled in comparison to, what you were paying about like 23 cents per kilowatt in Ireland. Now you're paying in the realm of 43 cents per kilowatt. It's almost doubled because of the conflict. And so we have a very fragile ecosystem and, socioeconomic system. But I'm not seeing all these developments as a negative thing, because energy is heavily subsidized. So which makes us see as that energy is very affordable and cheap. But that's not the case because it is subsidized. It often feels like, your access to it is greater. Actually, the more the energy will become more expensive, it will push us in the realm of thinking a bit more carefully about how long it should be on.
yeah,
And if you're not dimming LEDs, I'll be honest, this is the best quality that LEDs can offer.
yeah,
I don't know why you're using LEDs then. Also, equally, I see it in some projects that, like, lighting designers specify so many luminaires that, so many layers of light that they dim it, some of the lights to 5%. If you had to dim a light source to 5%, you probably didn't need that light source. You see what I mean?
yeah,
Also,
yeah,
why are we wasting this material? So how do we find the balance? But the direction we're going is, I think, we're getting much more responsible. And look, you can look at the status quo and feel very threatened and alarmed by how things are going wrong. But equally, in our history, we've shown ways to organize very quickly to mitigate, big problems, such as, the ozone layer, or lead in the petrol industry. And we acted very quickly to get rid of them. And one of the really, cool aspects, well, the only good aspect of light pollution probably is if you switch it off, it's gone.
yeah.
Unlike
It's
the other
simple.
types of pollutions.
Yeah, yeah. In theory, it should be easy to solve.
It's an easy one. Compare it to air or chemical pollution, which would take forever. You switch it off and it's gone.
Yeah,
And that's the way we should look at it. And I think there's a happy medium between pitch black darkness and lighting, and it's a very broad spectrum. So it doesn't need to be. What I'm only questioning here is the higher end of the intensity, but there's definitely a bigger vocabulary to be found, you know, between no light and some light. We're just saying maybe not too much light. That's the question there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's back to awareness, isn't it, as well? Like, you know, it's just sort of yeah, generating that awareness in the public, like even with people with their own houses and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
but
so
there's a real appetite, I think. Sorry, I'm cutting across. Yeah, yeah.
sorry, no,
Yeah.
I was just like I remembered that, you know, the Dark Sky International and Dark Sky Ireland, like they use this phrase very eloquently. I think it's about having the right light at the right time at the right place. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And being conscious in terms of how you approach it, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, look, thanks for that. It's Friday. It's bank holiday weekend here in Ireland this weekend, so we've got over the winter and we're into the spring. So I'm definitely not going to hold you too long, Kerem. But it's very interesting chatting, and
Yeah,
well
it
done
was
on what
really
you're
lovely
doing.
chatting. Thank you,
Yeah,
and likewise, and I really enjoyed this. Thanks for having me, and hope you enjoy your long weekend as well.
yeah, 100%. That's the plan.